probably one of my favorite Philip K. Dick books. And I was talking to Alex about it, the fact that it's one of his few books that's very rooted in our own time.
Yes.
A lot of his stuff, even if it's set in like 1984 or anything like that, it feels very future.
Yes.
And how is that adapting that into something? It actually reminded me a lot of an Upton Sinclair book called Oil that I really like, which is about classism and things like that. How is it like adapting that?
Well, it's interesting because Issa, his daughter, who's one of the producers of the show, told me he always wanted to be considered just a novelist, not a sci-fi novelist. But people wanted sci-fi from him, and I think this was his attempt to be taken seriously as a real novelist, and that's why I think it's so different from all the other things he wrote. And I think it's considered the crown jewel, among his works. It's a very challenging book. It's very rich and dense with ideas, and it was not an easy adaptation. And I had to sort of build it out. I had to add characters and plot that weren't in the novel to make it into a TV series that could sustain. But I did it all with the intent of honoring the ideas that he established in the book and kind of giving those ideas more space to grow, more space even than in the novel he had. So, for instance, in the novel there isn't John Smith. It doesn't really take place in the Nazi side of the U.S. at all. There isn't the sister who has the film. It's not a film, it's a book. There isn't Chief Inspector Keto. So there are all these other characters I knew I was going to need in this kind of storytelling. But hopefully, it's just to dig deeper into the world he created.
Have you, in talking to people about the show, have you found any illumination back in the sense of people, what they've experienced and what they're coming to you and their own feelings about it?
What I didn't fully appreciate, but I certainly do now, is how real this is. Which sounds funny because it's science fiction, it's alternative reality, but it's about our past, and it's about Nazis and Japanese, Jewish people being killed, and this is very sensitive, serious stuff. And you realize very quickly you better be very careful how you dramatize these things and what you say. And unfortunately, there are also people out there who could watch this show and be rooting for the wrong people, So it's a really delicate thing to plot this. And one of the things that I wanted to do is, Nazis, we're used to looking at them, they're the bad guys over there, with the shiny black boots and the swastikas, they're the bad guys, way over there. And in this show, they come right up to you because they're us. Most of the Nazis in the show have American accents. And something you've got to think, they did monstrous things, but they were people. How do people do these monstrous things? How do they justify it? Not all of them were psychopaths. Most of them weren't. How did they come to terms with all this? And you set it on American soil with American characters, and it makes you think about that.
That game show with the Nazis.
The game show.
That to me is just insane. Well, did you learn that in the Hitler Youth? Yeah, yes I did.
That was the very first thing we shot.
Really?
And it was the crew, people came to me, now I get the show. Now I get what you're doing. Because that guy was so all-American. The contestant in the Nazi uniform. And the whole format was so all-American. And it was so much like our past, but not. That's the strategy.
I have a bit of a two-part question for you. The show had a long process, adapting this book for the screen, you know what I mean? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also, now that we're here, what are the benefits of being an Amazon show?
So, Scott Free and Headline Pictures have been trying to get this made for 5 years before they came to me. And I know David Zucker, Ridley Scott's producer in Los Angeles, and he said, will you take a crack at this? And I said, sure. And then I read it. I hadn't read it since college. And I read it again. I go, oh my God, this is a tough adaptation. But anyway, I wrote the first 2 episodes for Sci-Fi, and my friend Tom Schnauz, who writes for Breaking Bad and now Better Call Saul, wrote 3 and 4, and they passed. And it was dead. It was dead for 2 years. And then Christmas, almost 2 years ago now, Morgan Wandell, who I'd known from ABC when he was my executive on Night Stalker, called me and said, I've just got a job at Amazon. Do you have any script you just love that really can make an impact? Because Amazon wants to make a big impact. I said, well, as it so happens, I have Man in the High Castle. And amazingly, he liked it, and amazingly, it led to the show being made. But it was really a Hail Mary. It's amazing that actually worked. But then the experience of being on Amazon, there's so many things that are different about it. But I'd say the most obvious ones are, first of all, they gave us a lot of money. Really, I can't imagine anybody else. I mean, there are very few people that would spend the money on the show that they did, and you really have to. It's part of why I think it was probably hard to get the show made all those years. It's a giant investment to make it properly.
I think that immersion is really important, right?
Really important, and it's big. I mean, look at the pilot. The pilot's New York, San Francisco, and Colorado. It's giant. And it's period, which is always very expensive. And it's a period that never happened, even more expensive. And then they were remarkably disciplined about not interfering. And they gave really very few notes. And I'm convinced they had a lot more notes, but they had self-control. And they were like, we're going to let you make this, which was great. And that, interesting what that does to you. You don't have 50 notes. If you have 50 notes, you tick them all off. You go, okay, I'm done. I've done your 50 notes. If you have 3 notes, well, I've got 20 more of my own. It's like it creates a kind of, you're responsible for this, which is a really good psychology to have. So if this fails, it's on me. It's not on them.
Going back to what we were talking about, how real the story is, because it is our history. How much were you informed by the fact that there's growing anti-Semitism in Europe and across the world right now? Mm-hmm. Because it may not have been as bad, but we had the Great Recession, and so many people are inclined to blame the other. I mean, you have Donald Trump blaming the Mexicans right now for all of our problems. How much does that inform it when you're writing and creating a story like this?
A lot. It's on my mind a lot, and I think that's why the show is particularly timely. And who knew? I mean, to some degree, it's always timely because there's always intolerance and hatred and fear. And I think those are the things that drive that phenomenon now. But a show like this, hopefully, it forces you to think about what's the difference between us and that state trooper in the pilot. What do we stand for? And we're so polarized in this country right now, so polarized between right and left. And it's so angry. And, I think everybody can agree we don't want to be occupied by Nazis. I think we can all be united by that. And then we can say, what is it that sets us apart? And this show, I think it makes you uneasy sometimes because there are scenes where you go, what is the difference? That's so close to something that I might say. It's not, though. It's not really. That's not an American, that thought. In my understanding of America, it's not. But somebody in America might say that. And so it makes you think about what do we stand for. And I feel like America is an idea. I've been an expatriate for 5 years, so I'm looking at America from the outside. It's a beautiful idea. But it's up to each generation to realize that idea. And if we don't, it's not going to happen. There's nothing inevitable. It says we're always going to be this great country that leads the world, inspires people. It's up to each generation to live up to that idea. And I think this is a show that, without preaching, it invites you to think about what makes us special and how do we stay special, which is a good thing. It's like you constantly have to renew that, I think.
One of the things that I noticed about this as I was watching, because I rewatched the pilot a couple times, is the fact that, there's the banality of evil. There's the state trooper where this is just the way things are. It's not a big deal anymore. And it's almost, there's that sense that people thought when the Nazis and the Japanese occupied, the world was going to end.
Right.
But it didn't.
Yes.
So life goes on.
That's correct.
And it's, how was it creating kind of that lived-in world and the sets and everything, and just creating that, how difficult was it to create that feeling of life going on and something that should be shocking but isn't?
Well, I think that's exactly it. We all like to think, if that happened, well, I'd be in the resistance. I'd be stopping. It's like, you know what? No. Like 99% of us would not. Unless you were Jewish or black, or unless you were forced, or they killed somebody in your family, right? Which is what happens in my pilot. You would just try to get along. Most of us would just try to stay alive, take care of our families, go to work. You would. You may not like it, but what would it take to make you step out of line and risk your life? What is the quality of freedom? What would you sacrifice to be free? And I remember when I was, you and I talked about this already, when I was in college, there was the solidarity protests in Poland. And I couldn't believe it, because the Soviet Union existed at that time. And And I thought, these guys, they're crazy. These steelworkers, they really think they're going to stop the Soviet Union? What chance do they have? The bravery, the stupidity of that. And then look what happened. The Soviet Union's gone. And Lech Walesa was the president of Poland. It's amazing. Amazing. And to set that on American soil and make Americans think about that was really exciting to me.
If people, and that was the comment I think we did as well. Would people step up today? The joke I made was that if they had their internet and they had their phone, okay, it's not so bad. I can still talk on the phone. I saw the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are so entertained right now. We are so entertained, but I really do feel there's a hunger in people to stand for something more, to have bigger ideas other than just, I've got my nice apartment, I've got my iPad and my TV and my stuff. This country is about big ideas, and it's nice to be able to talk about it. It's nice to have a story that allows you to talk about it.